You will have to excuse my disheveled appearance as I have been mowing for many hours. Well, at least one, because I have this nice new zero turn that turned a 4-hour job into a 1-hour job. But I've been going around here on my lawn tractor today trying to figure out exactly what story to tell you, because I know it's story time. And a story has been bouncing around in my mind that I have thought of telling you for many years, but I have not, because I don't think you'll like the ending. It's a story about what happens when you touch a ghost. This is a true story, and there very much is a ghost involved, but I don't think you're going to like the ending. So, I couldn't think of anything else. I've tried. So I'm going to tell you this one. Okay, this is a story that happened about 20 years ago. It's a true story. And again, you might not like the ending, but if you do hear me out, I'm going to ask you a big favor at the end of this video. For those of you who stick around, I'm going to ask you a big favor. And by the way, I've been eating peaches while I'm mowing. Peaches from our peach trees. We've grown so many peaches this year. We planted these trees about 5 years ago. There's so many peaches on the limbs. The limbs are like almost ready to break. So we've been picking some a few days before they ripen so we can beat the squirrels to them and the deer when they drop that eat them because the squirrels left them. We made videos on this channel, I'm sure, as we planted those fruit trees. Let me tell you, like I've said in those videos, don't wait to plant trees. Plant trees and wait. We planted these trees a few years ago. We waited, and now, Okay, so here's what happens when you touch a ghost. So this is probably October Nights Part 2 material here, because it kind of starts out the same way October Nights Part 1 did, when I talked about how I used to be a door-to-door salesman. You know, when I first came to the Charlottesville area, right out of college here in Appalachian, quarter of a century ago. I was a stockbroker, and I worked for a firm where we actually went out cold calling. We would knock on doors, and we would make 25 contacts a day. Well, I wasn't very good at it, so I'd make 30 contacts a day or more, because I talked a little funny, and people would ask me if I was from Kentucky, and then when I'd tell them I was from West by God, Virginia, they'd say, well, same thing. We don't do business with hillbillies, and they'd slam the door in my face. But I learned that if I got out of the city of Charlottesville and away from the university and got out into the country, I met some folks who weren't trying to put on airs, who weren't trying to show the world they were something they weren't, and didn't feel the need to insult others in order to make themselves feel a little bit more important. I met some real people, and these real people, by the way, had a lot of money, and they'd invested with me. And well, there was this one day, I remember going out, knocking on doors on this old country road. It was actually out in a neighboring county. It wasn't in Albemarle. It was in a neighboring county. And, man, I just wasn't getting anywhere. It was the middle of summer. It must have been late July. It was in the mid-90s. And I was 26 years old. Just been out of college a couple of years. And I was wearing like a jacket, like a blazer and a tie, because I looked like I was 19. And so the guy that trained me, he told me that I look so young, no matter how hot it gets, never take that jacket off, because people, they just don't trust young people with their money. Figure it, 19-year-old kid goes up to a 70-year-old man or woman who'd worked hard their whole life. They got their pension, they got a 401k, they got, $800,000 in investments and savings. They just don't want to turn it over to a 19-year-old kid to manage, right? I get that. I get it. So I couldn't take that jacket off no matter how hot it got. No, I didn't. So, knocking on doors. Come up to this house. Little old brick rancher, sitting there on the edge of about 1,000 acres. Of course, the old man that lived there and the old woman, they owned that 1,000 acres. And when he answered the door, told him what I was doing, who I was, he told me come in on the porch, have some ice cold lemonade. It's what you get down here in the South. You get ice cold lemonade or you get ice cold sweet tea. So he had lemonade that day. He said, no, tell me what you're doing. So I told him, I said, well, I'm going around trying to sell stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, and got to talk. They say 25 people a day, but I talk to 30 because I'm just an old, mountain boy from Appalachia, and them yuppies there in Charlottesville. They just want to give me a hard time. So I come out here in the country where the people are real, where people work, where they get their hands dirty, where they might look like poor white trash, but they're actually worth millions. You know what I mean? But they don't need to prove nothing to nobody because they know who they are. You know what I'm saying? So he said, yeah, I know what you're saying. He says, I'm not going to invest a dime with you because he says, I'm a retired principal of a bank that had a financial planning company. And so he's got everything locked up in trust with him. He says, well, I'm going to take you to meet a man I know. He's a kinfolk of mine. Can't remember just how. Says, you're going to like him. His name's Farmer Rob. Farmer Rob. It's a true story. So we get in this old man's car and we drive up the mountain for like 40 minutes. We get there and of course no one knocks on the doors. Everybody just walks in the back door. What do they say? Front doors are for visitors, back doors for family and friends. We go in the back door of this old farmhouse. It was probably a couple 100 years old on this beautiful, huge cattle farm, hundreds and hundreds of acres. There's this old man sitting there in a chair reading something, like a book. I know, can you believe it? Reading a book. The walls were just lined with books. This guy's house was just lined with books. He didn't have a television in the house. All these books. And he was about a generation younger than the old man I'd met. So it was probably his nephew or something like that. And I was, again, about 26 years old. This man at the time would have been mid-50s. So he gets up when he notices that two people came in and just sat down on the couch there in his living room where he's reading in this old farmhouse. Didn't even have central air conditioning. It's got like fans blowing. It was like 90-something degrees. This guy's hardcore, man. He's old school. Just got that old farmhouse, hundreds of acres, maybe 1,000-acre cattle farm, sitting there in front of a fan. So he said hello to, his kinfolk. I believe it was his uncle. He says, who's this? And he goes, well, and he introduces me and he tells him what I was doing. He says, keep getting my six. I never told you to in the beginning, but you know to do that by now anyhow, don't you? So he says he's an investment man. He'd like to take some of your money, invest it in something so you could make some money off of your money. And the guy chuckled a little bit. He goes, so where are you from? And I told him I was from Appalachia, and he told me, he says, them good people over there, them Appalachistanians, salt of the earth. They don't think they're nobody, they're not. A lot of them, at least. You'll have to excuse that edit. It didn't happen because this is a fake video, as most folks say. Most vertically challenged individuals who live under bridges. If they see an edit and a clip on YouTube, they say, well, you can tell this video is fake. I tell you, my belly's getting full of peaches, but I just can't stop eating them. These are delicious. Tastes even better knowing we grew them. Yeah. I forgot to set my phone here as I'm recording on Do Not Disturb mode, but it's there now. Somebody called trying to get me to do some kind of pyramid thing. Whatever. We don't do that stuff. So anyway, hey guys, all West by God, Virginia, Appalachia, yeah, used to be good people there. Still are a few, retired. So anyway, he starts talking about World War II. But Thought I heard a tree knock. So he's talking about World War II because he's reading some book about World War II. And I guess he used to teach history, but he was retired. It's going on and on. I'm falling asleep. I'm telling you, this guy could tell these long, drawn-out, boring stories. Like a story that could have been told in like 2 or 3 minutes. He'd drag it out for like 20 or 30 minutes. So anyway, he's going on and on about something about World War II. And his girl, listen, he had 2 daughters. They were twins. They were like 17, and they were beautiful young girls, okay? One of them comes into the back door, and she's got her back against the door, and she's looking at me like all nervous and stuff. And I'm like, what's going on here? And so she comes over, she sneaks around, comes up behind the couch and says into my ear, she goes, do you want to see a ghost? And I'm like, I guess. And she's like, come out to the barn with me and my sister. And I'm like, woohoo, time out now. Time out now. I'm like 26. How old are you? She's like, I'm like, no, I'm not going out to the barns with no 17-year-old girls. Like I said, I'm from Appalachian. I know what folks will do to set you up, make you look like you did something they didn't. If they want your job, or if they just want to discredit you, or if maybe you're somebody they think you got a few dollars in the bank, they want to take it. No ma'am, no sir, I ain't going out to the barn with you and your really pretty twin sister. She's like, no, there's a ghost here. There's a ghost. You got to come see it. Well, about that time, her dad heard her. And he's like, hey, is that ghost back? And she said, yeah, I'm trying to get this guy to come out and see it so we know it's not just us. And her dad said, well, everyone knows it's not just us. We've been seeing that thing around here for generations. It's great-great-great-grandpa Greg. Great-great-great-grandpa Greg. Just remember that. 5 G's. Great-great-great-grandpa Greg. That's how I remembered. So I'm like, what's going on here? Farmer Rob? He says, well, great-great-great-grandpa Greg, he came down from Pennsylvania in the late 1600s to settle this place. He loved it so much. Got the land, by the way, by the old tomahawk land laws, where if you went out with the tomahawk, if you went to a stream and you carved a niche into a tree, you owned all the land for 2 kilometers back from that stream in both ways. So this is how the English government, this is before we were a country, this is when we were still a colony, for those of you who don't know this about history. This is how England got the white settlers to continue to move west. So basically they got into a race who could run west the fastest and carve some notches in some trees and ended up having 1,000 or 2,000 acres worth of property. So that's how they got theirs, you know. Now, I went up and saw Farmer Rob a lot of times, and he used to go on and on about how rich people needed to give more to the poor and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you got 1,000 acres out here. Why don't you take about 500 of it and go downtown and find 500 poor people and give them all an acre, let them build a house on it? Oh, he didn't like that idea. No, sir, no, ma'am. He was talking about the billionaires, not the millionaires, not the millionaires who were born into families who for 6 generations owned land that they tomahawk, landlord, or was granted by King James, like up here 25 generations ago, 5,000 acres. Doesn't apply to them. Applies to those guys that started with nothing and went out and created Microsoft and Apple and Dell and toy-built awesome zero-turn mowers. Those are the guys that should give up their wealth, because by God, they made it. They weren't born into it. I digress. So, Farmer Rob looks at me and he says, do you believe in ghosts? And I say, well, I reckon I believe in just about anything. He goes, well, do you know what happens if you touch a ghost? And I said, no, sir, I reckon I don't. He said, well, it will just vanish and it'll leave you alone forever. if you got a ghost haunting you, all you got to do is reach out there and touch it. It'll leave you alone forever. I says, how you know that, Farmer Rob? He goes, let me prove it to you. It's going out to the barn. I was all right going out to the barn by then because the old man was going out, with his very beautiful young daughters. So there'd be a witness when they want to say something happened that didn't, you know what I'm saying? So we got that barn. I'll be daggum. Here's this guy. Looks a lot like Farmer Rob, but more see-through, if you know what I'm saying, like more transparent. And he's picking up hay bales, and he's like throwing them off the top of the hay loft, and he's screaming, wah, hoo-ah, like go Cavaliers, wah, hoo-ah. You can tell he's from Virginia. He's like, wah, hoo-ah, and he's busting up all the hay. Farmer Rob goes there, and he goes, no, dadgummit, great-great-great-granddaddy Greg, I told you stop messing with my hay like that. Why, you're just effing everything in this barn up. Dadgummit, I'm going to touch you, and you won't come around here no more. Thought I saw movement back there. So anyway, great-great-great-granddaddy Greg, the ghost, so it's got 6 G's, says, come at me, brah. So we go at him. The 2 girls come around from the sides because they were sneaking up, and they looked just like each other. They were really, they were identical twins, and they were really pretty. Going up the ladder. So I'd snuck around the back and trying to come up around the back, up this other ladder, and Farmer Rob just runs straight at him. We come at him, and he's laughing. He's swinging hay bales like this. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, 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 ha. And we just jump, we dive, and he just vanishes. And we all bang our heads up against each other's heads. And I say, well, did we get him? And we hear that guy, great-great-great-granddaddy Greg, the ghost, laughing on the other end of the barn. He says, not today, young man, not today. And he laughed and he vanished. And I looked at Farmer Rob and I said, what's going on here? You said if you touch a ghost, he disappears. You supposedly know everything. Why didn't this work out? And he goes, well, we never touched him. I was like, okay, well, let's say we did. Would he have disappeared and he'd never come back anymore and mess with your hay? He goes, well, I don't know. It's how the story goes. I'm like, what do you mean that's how the story goes? He goes, well, the story that's been passed down in our family generation after generation is if you touch a ghost, here's what happens if you touch a ghost. You touch a ghost, it goes away, it doesn't haunt you anymore. And I'm like, well, is this fact? You acted like it was fact. He goes, I don't know. And I'm like, how do you not know? And he says, because no one's ever touched a ghost to find out.